Okay, let's talk more about the states being recession ready and the prospects for higher taxes. Joining us now, former Indiana governor and U.S. Senator Evan Bayh and former U.S. Senator Jim DeMint. And I complain about a lot of when we set up debates, how it always seems we get a rhino with a Dem. Now I got the opposite problem, I think, Evan. You're like a dinosaur in that part. You don't recognize a party that you used to be part of right now, I don't think. And Jim DeMint, you were... I think one of the persons that they could get a job at a conservative think tank afterwards with no problem whatsoever. Evan, have you got an idea of what to do here for New Jersey or Illinois?
Well, I think you touched on it, Joe, and I'm happy to report that Becky's home state, where I had the privilege of being governor for 8 years, we had a bipartisan consensus, a lot like you just mentioned in California, where we got our spending in order. We put together a rainy day fund for when volatile revenues went down. And so we fund our pensions. So, you know, these are hard political choices, but it's not rocket science. Those are the things you have to do, and it helps to do it on a bipartisan basis. Clearly, in Illinois and New Jersey, that has not existed.
Senator DeMint, what in your view, are you just going to tell me to cut spending?
Well, I'm glad at least we're talking about state debt right now. We always talk about the $22 trillion federal debt, but states combined have $3 trillion in debt, and many of them have unfunded liabilities that are so large they can't handle. There are a lot of states, like Evan Bayh was just talking about for his state when he was governor, that have dealt with the pension problem. They're getting ready for the future, not just for a recession. But we've got a large number of states with debt and pensions, and they're not dealing with it. In fact, a lot of states are adding to their pension benefits. And you've got states like California now where the average retired state worker is making 25% more than the average worker in California. It's unsustainable. We've got to cut spending. We've got to balance some more what the federal government does and what the state governments do. But we can't keep sweetening these pension pots in a way to buy votes from government workers, because a lot of us forget that the largest employers in most states are the state governments, and it's a good way to buy votes to promise future pensions.
Senator DeMint, one of the points you make here, okay, this is one of your comments, and I'll let Governor Senator Bayh respond to it. I would hope that the states would learn from the example of President Trump that tax cuts and deregulation are truly what boosts economic growth. Taxes only hurt it. Would you mention Kansas, or how would you respond to that, Evan?
Well, it is true when you raise taxes, you make your state less competitive economically. And it's also true that in some states like your home state, Joe, the most successful people will vote with their feet. You know, once their combined federal and state tax rates get above 50%, they'll look for alternative places to live. I don't think the dramatic tax cuts in Kansas weren't, transformative, but here's what you got to do. When times are good, a lot of money tends to come in. And the temptation, as Jim was saying, was either to spend way too much or cut taxes way too much. The answer is all things in moderation. So keep the spending increases in check, put some away in the rainy day fund, and fully fund your pension. So when tough times come along, you're prepared for that. Politically, the temptation is to just kind of let the party roll when times are good, and then you got real bad choices to make when times are tough.
Evan, didn't you see Hickenlooper and that other guy out in California at that convention, and they got booed? Right now, you're getting booed all across Demland. Didn't you see that? Haven't you learned from that?
Well, Joe, with all due respect to my friends out in California, the people who attended that convention may not represent all of America for sure, may not represent even the majority of the Democratic Party. That tends to be the furthest left element. So there are moderates in my party, and the general election will be decided by moderates. And so I hope as Democrats we keep that in mind.
Go ahead.
Senator Bayh, I just have a quick question. What concerns me is that it's clear the federal government is not ready for a recession, given the amount of debt and given that we just lowered taxes. The states, what was interesting about this report is any even moderate downturn is going to feel like the last crisis because these states are now so dependent on the income tax, which is dependent on that 1%. But if we have a recession, so therefore, given those conditions, what's to say that states will not just continue what they've done, which is raise taxes rather than cut costs?
Well, some might. And for those states, it will be more difficult going forward economically. For example, Illinois borders my state, and there are businesses that choose to locate in Indiana because the tax rates and the regulatory environment are just so different. So you can do some of that, but you go too far and it hurts your competitiveness, and the most successful people leave, which then makes the problem even worse. So
I mean, everyone was expecting with the SALT change that these states would react by cutting costs, and in fact the opposite happened.
Well, you can do some in cutting costs, and in fact in Indiana we did that. But when you look at most state budgets, it's either pension obligations, which it's difficult to get out of those legally, correctional costs. Well, we're not going to open the prisons and just let the inmates go. And then education. The other two things are education. It's tough to cut teacher spending. Probably shouldn't do that. And finally, healthcare costs in Medicaid. There is some waste you can wring out of the Medicaid program, but those are very poor people. So you can't just throw them out in the street. So your hands are kind of tied. That's why I come back to start a rainy day fund. Don't just let the party roll. Start a rainy day fund when times are relatively good, like now, so that you got some leeway then when tough times come along to not either raise taxes or make draconian spending cuts. It's hard to do. It's hard to do politically, but you need to do it from a policy standpoint. It's the right thing to do.
Senator DeMint, there were times when you actually worked with the other side of the aisle, and actually, in terms of policy, you proposed a lot of things, entrepreneurship, the policy, but could you function in the current environment in the Senate right now or Washington writ large right now? I mean, I'll ask Evan the same question later, but what do you make? I don't think anything's going to happen at all till 2020.
Well, I haven't seen it this divided. I mean, we had more folks like Evan when I was there that you could at least talk to and work with. A lot of the things I proposed, we had Democrat co-sponsors. So the environment is pretty poisonous right now, and a lot of it's performing to the base. I think I believe in open government, but I think a lot of the C-SPAN and the coverage of the hearings has turned legislators into performers. But I think behind closed doors, we used to see more camaraderie between Republicans and Democrats. And from what I understand, and I'm still working on the Hill a lot, it certainly has not as good as it was. So I worry for our country. I worry for our state right now. The issue we've been talking about this morning, I think it's going to be more than just a couple of states in a recession. I think we're going to have a large block of states who want to get bailed out by the federal government, and because we can print money up here and the states can't do that. Evan's got the right solution there. States now are generally getting a lot of extra tax revenue. Economy is good. They need to create a rainy day fund. They need to solve their long-term pension plan. And there's more that can be worked out at the state level now than we can work out at the federal level.